friends, welcome back to the Spooky Files. If you're returning, thank you so much for coming back. And if this is your first episode, welcome. I'm so glad to have you. I'm your host, Mary Ellen Quigley. This is where we dive into the paranormal, the unexplained, the I swear I saw something, but I don't want to admit it moments that we all have. Today's episode is called Creatures You Can't Explain. These aren't your classic monsters. They don't fit into neat labels, and they're definitely hard to explain. These are the encounters where someone sees something and they immediately start looking for logic, like maybe it was a dog or deer or a bear or a person, but what they saw doesn't quite fit either one of those things. I think these kind of moments are the most terrifying when you're standing in nature, which is a place that we all think we understand pretty well, but then you realize that you don't understand anything at all. Night stories come from hunters, hikers, and people who were just minding their business when something watched them back. So grab a snack, get comfortable, and let's get into it. Story 1 is the deer with human eyes. And this one was sent in by Matt, who grew up hunting with his father and grandfather. Matt writes, I've been hunting my entire life. I know the woods. I know how animals behave when they're scared, curious, or aggressive. This wasn't any of those things. I was waiting in my deer stand just before sunrise, the time of day where there isn't much going on yet. No birds making sounds. There was also no wind that day. So it stuck out clearly when I noticed movement at the tree line. A deer stepped out. At first, everything looked normal. Big buck, healthy body, thick neck, clean coat. I thought, well, this is going to be an easy day. I'll snag my first buck first thing and be done for the day. The deer was walking across the clearing, and then it stopped and looked straight at me. Not a quick glance either. It locked eyes with me, and that's when I realized its eyes were wrong. They were too focused. There was no fear or curiosity. There was recognition, like it knew exactly who I was and what I was doing. It looked like human eyes in the face of a deer. I froze because it creeped me out so badly. Then the deer rose onto its back legs, not standing fully upright, but enough that I could see the front legs weren't bending the way they should. It almost looked like a deer suit, or like something pretending to be a deer. Whatever it wasn't right. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I would pass out. Everything about this felt wrong. A few moments later, the deer, or whatever it was, dropped back down, turned, and walked back into the trees. I sat frozen for nearly 20 minutes after that. When I climbed down, I ran for my truck. I was afraid that whatever I saw was still out there. I still live near that land, but I don't hunt on it anymore. And I no longer go hunting alone. I looked into creatures and legends, and I think I have an idea of what I saw, but I would love to know what your listeners think. The idea of a deer with human eyes is one of those things you can't unsee when you hear it. Now, I have a pretty good idea of what Matt saw, and if you're into the paranormal world, you probably know where my mind is going. Now, I'm not going to say what it is because legend has it that if you say its name, you attract their attention. So I'm not going to say it, but if you know, you know. I'm scared of the woods anyway, and the number of paranormal experiences that happen deep in the woods is shocking. I've never been hunting, nor have I ever wanted to do so, but it's definitely not something I would be doing alone. All right, let's move on. Story 2 is called The Thing on the Roof of the Barn. And this story comes from 2 teenagers that were brave enough to tell their story together, but they asked me to tell it as though it's one account. So here we go. They write, we were 16 and hanging out at my uncle's farm for the weekend. There's nothing creepy about the place. It has wide open fields and an old red barn, and it's really quiet. Too quiet if you ask us because we grew up in the city, so being out in the country is uncomfortable. My uncle was working long hours in the fields that weekend because it was harvest time, and he wanted us to help watch his dogs. It was late, maybe midnight, and we were sitting next to the fire pit talking when we heard something scrape across the barn roof. Not footsteps, but dragging. We looked up and saw it crouched at the top of the roof. The creature was long, not tall, long. The arms and legs were stretched thin, joints bent wrong, like whatever it was hadn't figured out how to hold itself together yet. It didn't have fur or clothes, just pale skin pulled tight, like squeezing into a pair of tight pants. Then it moved. Not normal, though. It skittered like an animal would and slid straight down the side of the barn. We ran for the house and locked the door. We stayed up all night with the lights on, pretending to watch TV. The next morning, we went back outside. There were no signs of whatever this was, and we never saw it again. Later that day, my uncle asked why we had been cooped up in the house all day because he hadn't seen us outside. I told him what we saw. He didn't look shocked or surprised. Instead, he said, "Well, honey, you have to be careful after dark around here, but if you don't bother it, it won't bother you." He never explained what it was, and he refused to tell us anything more about what we experienced. Farms aren't mysterious the way that deep forests are because they're wide open spaces, right? Like you can see for miles, and that makes you believe that if something's out there, you'll notice it coming. And yet, whatever this was didn't even sneak. It just perched itself up on the highest part of the barn like it belonged there. What also gets me is that the creature didn't try to chase them. It didn't scream. It didn't threaten. It's almost like it was just peeking at them to check out what they were doing, more like it was curious. And then it took off. I would love to know more about what the uncle has experienced out there. Like, what does he know that he isn't telling anyone? I have so many questions. Okay, one more story today, and it takes us back to the woods. Story 3 is called The Woman Who Followed Me Out of the Woods. And this story was sent in from Kenya, who sent it to me through TikTok. So thank you, Kenya, for sharing your story with us. She writes, I was hiking a popular trail mid-morning. It was well marked and safe, so I wasn't nervous at all. In fact, I had already passed several people along the way. About halfway in, I noticed a woman standing off the trail in the shade between the trees. She was barefoot, with long dark hair hanging straight down. She wasn't moving, just staring at me as I walked the trail. I smiled and nodded to be polite, but she didn't respond. As I passed her, I realized something was wrong. There were no footprints, not behind her, not leading away, nothing. The grass and brush off the side of the trail were unbothered. I knew that if she had walked off the trail, there should be signs, or at least a path where she had walked. I thought it was strange, so I sped up. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. There was no one on the trail, but the woman was there again. Same distance, standing just off the side of the trail in the shade where I could barely see her. That was when I got scared. I thought maybe the woman was following me or I was being targeted for some kind of human trafficking thing, so I took off in a jog to get back to my car. When I reached the parking lot, I didn't stop jogging. I went straight to my car and locked the doors. When I looked back one last time, she was standing at the tree line, but had stepped partially into the sun. This was when I noticed how pale she was. And I know it sounds crazy, but it almost looked like her skin was made of scales, or at least her arms were. I started my car and got out of there as fast as I could. I have no idea what I saw that day, but it definitely wasn't human. I haven't been back to that trail since. That is absolutely terrifying. And with everything I know about paranormal creatures, cryptids, and the like, I am really curious about what she saw on the trail that day. Like, was it a ghost or some kind of other creature? I was racking my brain trying to figure out what kind of paranormal creature has scales. And I found a few, but none of them completely fit the description that Kenya gives of this creature. I would be curious to hear what you guys think she saw. It's definitely creepy. And I think the worst part is that it was following her down. Like, why was it following her down the trail? What did it want from her? Was it just curious? Or was there some other kind of ill intention that was connected to that? And that brings us to the end of episode 5, Creatures You Can't Explain. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Follow me on social media. Leave a comment because I love hearing from all of you. And if you have a scary story you would like me to share on the podcast, you can email it to the spookyfilespodcast@gmail.com or send me a message on social media. I read every single email or message, and it helps us build a community of people who don't just love the paranormal and spooky stories, but also are looking for a safe space to talk about all the things we don't always like to admit. Make sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. If you're looking for more paranormal content, check out my other podcast, Hoosier Myths and Legends, where my sister and I share all things spooky from the state of Indiana. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and keep it spooky, my friends.